feel like we are in this hair on fire race to this imaginary finish line of like state tests and milestones and all this kind of stuff. And it's like the love of learning gets lost in it because kids are freaked out because they're like, you got to take this test. You got to do well. And nobody speaks. And if you speak, the test is ruined. And then it's like, what are we doing?
Hey there, fellow educators, and honestly, anyone who's ever wondered what would happen if we actually listened to teachers for once. I'm Leah Cleary, and this is If Teachers Ruled the World. You know, after 25 years in the classroom, I've learned that teaching isn't really about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to ask the right questions, and maybe, just maybe, admitting when we have no idea what we're doing, which, let's be honest, happens more often than we'd like to admit. So grab your coffee, or whatever, and let's talk about the real stuff, the messy, imperfect, sometimes beautiful reality of what it's like to shape young minds while trying to keep our own sanity intact. Because if we're going to change the world, we might as well be honest about what that actually looks like. All right, let's dive in. Hey everyone, and welcome back to If Teachers Ruled the World. I'm Leah Cleary, and I just have to tell you, I am so energized after the conversation you're about to hear. I spoke with Tracy Dixon on a Monday night, and both of us had just finished very long days at work. But talking to Tracy, it was completely recharging. She's so dedicated to her job and just so much fun to talk to. Tracy is a paraprofessional at a charter high school, but education isn't her first career, not even close. She was a flight attendant, then she worked in school nutrition for 11 years before transitioning to classroom support about 3 years ago. And you know what? I find that some of the most interesting people in education are the ones who've taken that kind of circuitous path to get where they are. Where they've been gives them such a unique perspective on where they are now. I also love that Tracy is a parapro because, let's be honest, support staff doesn't always get the recognition or voice they deserve. They do so much for our students. And Tracy's teacher law, which you're going to hear about, is so beautifully focused on what's actually best for students, not what makes adults feel better. Here's what really struck me about Tracy's perspective. As a paraprofessional, she works with individual students, yes, but she's also in multiple classrooms. She gets to see many different students in many different types of classes. Most of us classroom teachers, we're in our niche every day. I teach math, you teach history, someone else teaches English, and that's really all we're exposed to. But Tracy's been exposed to everything. Academic classes, vocational programs, self-contained special education, and of course, she began her journey in education working in school nutrition. So she's literally seen it all. That's a perspective I certainly don't have as a classroom teacher, and I think you're going to find her insights as valuable as I did. So here's my conversation with Tracy Dixon about realistic expectations, the view from staff support, and what happens when we actually focus on what's best for kids instead of what's comfortable for adults. Hi, Tracy. It's great to have you today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I've actually worked in the school system for 14 years. I started off actually in school nutrition and then moved to the education side of things about 4 years ago and was actually in self-contained special ed for a couple of years and have since moved to the general education side of things. So the last couple of years I've been general education.
That is a really interesting perspective. When I found that out, I was really excited to interview you, to have you on the show, because you've seen a side of education that I've never seen. You've worked in the school nutrition side and you've been in the classroom side too. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe the difference between how you interact with students in those two settings?
It's actually very interesting because when you think of school nutrition, you just think of, like serving food and in and out. And it was so interesting because for whatever reason, the children would open up to me and tell me all kinds of things about their personal lives, home lives and relationships and all this. And that's kind of how I developed my love for education, was just being able to interact with them on a daily basis on that level, and just really gives you a window into what kids are dealing with on a daily basis. And I feel like it really gave me a good foundation for how to then, when I moved over into the education side of things, how to really empathize with them and be able to help them.
And that's really at the heart of it, what education is about, what teaching is about. It's really about building relationships and being responsive. So, coming from the nutrition side of it, do you feel like you had a little more time to talk to students, to talk to them and for them to open up, or do you find that they open up in the same way in the classroom?
It was interesting because you would have students who would, make that time. They would seek me out and my coworkers to come over and, talk or, just have a conversation. And, it was interesting because it was, more students dealing with that side of things than what I deal with now. It's a little bit more, controlled in that. But same thing. I don't know. I find it easy to build relationships with students.
So, what is your favorite thing about being in the classroom now?
I think it's what most teachers would say. It's, building those relationships with the students, and when you see that spark of understanding, and because it's not only, for the student, that excitement of they got it. It's the pride of knowing that you did your job, you did it well, and you're getting somewhere. So I think that would be my favorite thing. It's just those moments of discovery with them.
Another thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is that, well, two things. You're in a charter school right now. I teach at a traditional school. So a charter school is, I'm imagining, a little bit of a different experience. I think that you've only been in the classroom in a charter school. Were you in nutrition in traditional school settings?
It was the same school. So I just kind of slid over, but it's interesting to me because you would think it would be different, but I find that it often is not, because you encounter like the same problems. I would say 80% of my friends group is teachers, so we have a lot of conversation as to, what goes on in classrooms and with students and things. So I find that it's the same kind of issues that you deal with regardless as to what type of school you're in.
Before you were in a school setting, you were a flight attendant, weren't you?
That's correct. I was.
Well, what did you learn from being a flight attendant that translates to education that might surprise us?
That's an excellent question, because the one carryover from that job is the people that I had the most problems with on the plane were controlling people. Because when any person gets in a situation where they feel like they are not in control is when bad things happen. And I see that a lot with my students as well. Because when they feel like they're not being heard or they're not being validated, bad things happen.
That is incredibly true. Now, you're a parapro in a classroom, right? And before you were in the general ed classroom, you were in a self-contained special needs classroom. And that was very difficult, isn't it?
It can be.
What in particular did you find, I'm going to say, difficult about it, and what did you find rewarding? Because that's a scenario that I've never been in public education.
Fun fact, I actually started working with special needs children when I was in middle school. Somebody that I worked for, she ran a camp in the summertime for children with special needs, and she asked me if I would come and work with her in the summertime. So that's what I would do in the summer. Then I actually went to college for education, went a couple of years and was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm just going to take a year off. And next thing you know, I'm a flight attendant. And 20 years later, here I am in education again. So, but
You kind of went full circle.
yes, absolutely. So it's funny how things work. But
It is.
I mean, it's the same thing for me. It was like, when I worked in self-contained, it's those wonderful moments of when you try so hard to teach a skill, and it doesn't matter what that skill is, if it's how to tie your shoes or, when you go to general education, it's, how to figure something out. It's just when they get it, it's pride in your student. It's that just wonderful feeling of we figured it out together and we were able to do that. But I think the hardest thing for me working when I worked in self-contained was it was the repetition from year to year because the curriculum doesn't change at all because by nature it really can't because you're learning a different set of skills than you are in the general ed classroom. So I think
More
that
like
was
life
just
skills.
yes. I think that was probably just the thing that was difficult in that setting.
And so what classes are you in right now?
I do all kinds of different classes. Ironically, I do aviation, which makes sense. Healthcare.
That does make sense. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's healthcare, engineering, drafting.
Aviation.
Yeah. And it's funny because the flight attendant job encompasses so many things. I was a flight attendant for less than 6 months when I had to do CPR on somebody. So, yeah, now I'm in the healthcare class and, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of carryover with the job.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I found out that you had done that because, it's a job where you're serving people and you're serving people in education, right? And you're taking care of people and you're taking care of people in education. And then, sometimes taking care of them can mean CPR, right?
Mhm.
Taking care of a student when they're having seizures or what have you.
The panic attacks. We have a lot of that these days, anxiety,
Yeah.
panic, that sort of thing.
And it's interesting that you would say that because I wonder, your law that you came up with. I was intrigued by this when I read your law, and your law was well, it focuses on realistic expectations about what kids can and can't do. It focuses on parents. How did you word it?
Yeah, I don't remember it, but the gist of it was, it is all right for children to fail because we can't all be good at everything. And parents, you need to know your children. I have 2 children of my own, and they're completely different. But, I feel like we just kind of do a disservice to our kids when we try to make them be something that they're not.
And that can definitely lead to anxiety and maybe
Yes.
panic attacks and things like that. One thing that I wanted to ask you about this, I don't know how it is at a charter school, but I know at my school, paraprofessionals don't interact with parents that much. And
Correct.
yes, okay. And my mom, she was a paraprofessional, and she didn't interact with parents at all. And so I found it really interesting that your law would have to do with parent expectations when you're not on a daily basis really interacting with the parents. You see the other side of it. You see the kids and how it's impacting them. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's true, but we do, interact with the student's IEP. So you're seeing the instructions that has been agreed upon by the parents and, the staff.
Got you. Yes.
We don't have that physical interaction, but we definitely, by all means, follow every IEP to the letter and do exactly what it says. But, once you get to know the students and you kind of feel all that out, it's like sometimes I feel like we're setting kids up for failure and we're setting them up to pick up a tab that they didn't order, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Pick up a tab that they didn't order. So something that maybe their parents envisioned for them, that they're
Right.
pushing them to do, that maybe the child isn't excited about, maybe isn't even good at, because we can't all
Yeah.
get good at everything. But it's just what their
Well,
parents do for them.
yes, and that's what I always say. There's 3 things that together it's like the trifecta of failure that I cannot overcome. Lack of ability, lack of interest, and lack of caring. Because when you get all 3 of those things together, it's almost insurmountable. But if you have like 2 out of 3, like you just have one thing, like you're able, you're not interested, you don't really care, but you're still able, it's like I can work with that. But if you're able and you don't care, but you're really interested, I can work with that. It was like when I was a kid, I tell people all the time, I wanted so bad to be an astronaut. I was going to be an astronaut. Well, yeah, I'm bad at math. I was never going to be an astronaut. Yeah, so I ended up a flight attendant. Next best thing. But it's like you have to know your abilities because we're not all going to be nuclear physicists, right?
Oh, definitely not me. And I'll tell you, I can definitely speak to that because I wanted to be a singer and a dancer on the stage, and I can't carry a tune very well. And I have 2 left feet and no rhythm, and so, yeah, I could go and take the little lessons, and I could prance around the stage, but I was never good. So,
Right.
it was better for me to just find something else.
Yeah. And I mean, every single one of us has value. We all have a place in this world, but it isn't the same place.
Hmm.
And, it's like I don't need a physicist when my toilet won't flush. I could care less if you have a PhD if my toilet won't flush.
Heard, I'm calling the plumber, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And they're gonna
So
make a
it's
lot of
like,
money off of that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you remember those aptitude tests that we used to take when we were kids?
Yes.
I love those things. I absolutely loved them. I think I took one in college. I know I took one in high school. I took the ASVAB, frankly, because it got me out of 2 class periods. So I was like, yeah, I'll take the test. I had no intention of going to the military. I was like,
Yeah,
sure.
no, I said yes like I did because I was never happy with what they said I was good at. But go on.
Well, and that's what's funny is because I took the test and it was like, you'd be an excellent farmer. And I was like,
Right.
okay, I have family that are farmers. And I'm like, I'm not about getting up before the sun. I would never want to do that. But had I had some guidance, maybe someone to say, well, have you ever thought about landscape design or horticulture, something like that? I'd be like, now, wait a minute, what's that thing? Because now in my adulthood, I've always wanted to take like master gardener classes and like, do that. I love horticulture and landscape design and all that sort of thing. So it's like there's something to be said for those aptitude tests because we all have things that we're good at. And, maybe if there's something that you're good at, you can kind of channel that, but it does no good to try to put a child in something that they have no aptitude for. They're not interested in, because mom's like, oh, that's what you should do.
Right. Mommy
It's
wants you to be a lawyer, so you're gonna do this, this, and this when maybe you would be a brilliant landscaper or electrician.
Exactly.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. So can you think of an example, maybe a story, of course, without naming names, but can you think of a time that you've seen that impact a student?
Well, I mean, it makes me think of when I was in school, I took 4 years of German. And we did the German exchange student program and all that, and that's one thing that is always kind of in the back of my mind. Like in Germany, they have this educational model. Before you get into their equivalent of high school, you're channeled into either a trade route or a college route. And it's according to testing. It's not really what mom and dad want you to do, it's what you're able to do. And I think it does kids a service because you're not we have so many problems in education because of misplacement of children. And that goes for like gifted kids too, because if they're in like a regular setting, but they're capable of more, they might be a discipline problem because they're bored.
And that's true. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we could and should do a better job about finding those different paths and providing those different paths for students. It goes back to No Child Left Behind, really, doing away with the vocational paths and everybody being college prep, and everybody's not necessarily going to go to college or should go to college.
Right. I went 2 years, and I mean, it turned out to be a good thing because at the time, I just took my core classes. I ended up getting an associate's, but I had no direction. Where I grew up, that's what you did. You graduated, you went to college. There was no, that's what you did. It was socially acceptable and all the things. So, and now looking back as an adult, I'm like, oh, I had never heard of like Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College, but that would have been a perfect fit. Drove past it on my way to my alma mater of Valdosta State University every time I would go to and from, but I didn't know what that was. So it's just, I don't know. I just feel like my original point was allowing kids to fail we learn so much more from our failures than we do our successes, I feel like.
I would agree with that.
And it is okay to let a kid fail because not only do you learn, hey, maybe I'm not good at that, but you also learn consequences and effort equals success. You may not be the smartest kid in the class, but you can still be successful if you put forth enough effort. C's get degrees, you know?
That's true. C's get degrees. Tell me about a little bit about that. Have you ever seen a child, or can you think of a time that you yourself have learned something really valuable from failing?
Oh gosh, I think that's just life. And I feel like when you just put people in places where they don't fit, again, you're setting them up for failure. They're going to pick up the tab for whatever decision that you have made for them. And, that holds so true for our students because it's just, and I mean, that's the wonderful thing about high school and college. That's your time to explore and kind of figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at, where you belong. But with that comes failure. And I feel like we do kids a disservice by ensuring that everyone is successful in everything by any means possible. And I see that a lot that, all this extended deadlines and do-overs and retakes and, all this. And I'm like, this does not translate into reality. Because if I go to my job and I'm never there, they're not going to keep me. They're going to fire me. And they don't care. Georgia's a right to work state. You can be sick. They don't care. You're fired. You're never here. Or I don't do the job that was asked of me on a consistent basis. They're going to fire me. They're not going to give me do-overs and second chances. And I don't understand why it is that way in education today. If you can tell me, please tell me, because I do not understand.
I wish I would. That's one reason why I started this podcast, because I just wanted to give teachers a voice, because there's so many things going on that make zero sense. So many things that go on that don't make a lot of sense. And I think you hit something right there about, we talk about, and I've brought this up before on the show, growth mindset and how important it is, but we're in a system that has a fixed mindset, if that makes sense. But along with that fixed mindset, we've got this idea that we can't put that F on the report card, because once it's there, that's their record and you've ruined it. And now Johnny won't be a lawyer, or Johnny won't be a doctor or a professor, or astronaut, or engineer, are one of the accepted things that a lot of the kids' parents want them to be, even though maybe that's not for them. Maybe they want to be landscapers, right? Or
Mhm.
electricians.
Well, and it's so funny because have you ever watched that show I think it's called Off the Boat?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's about a family an immigrant family from Asia, and the male lead in the show went to college to be a doctor, like a physician doctor, and he did all the things because that's what his mom and dad wanted him to do, but what he really wanted to do was act. So what is he now? He is an actor, and he paid all that money to go
Oh,
to doctor school. And it boggles my mind. I tell people all the time, maybe it goes to my age because my generation was certainly allowed to fail. Not classes, entire
great.
grades. Like you're repeating the grade.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a teaching moment that if effort equals success. And if you don't put in the effort, you're not going to be successful. And that's okay because maybe things aren't, for you. Maybe, there's something else out there that you need to do. I personally have a friend around the corner who has an eighth grade education. He owns his own business and he does quite well, and that's the exception to the rule.
That
But
is definitely the exception, but he's probably wow,
yeah,
imagine if somebody had realized when he was in school what his potential was, then maybe they could have, steered him in that direction.
exactly. I think that goes back to the generational thing where we're so blessed now to recognize difficulties in students that were not recognized when I was younger. It's just you can't behave, you're a bad kid. And now it's like, oh, the child has, is on the autism spectrum or, is ADHD or whatever. They didn't really have a whole lot of that when I was younger. But I think that's one of the wonderful things about working in special education as well as general education. It's like you see these things and you can work with them and you can overcome them if you have everybody working together, you have some effort, and, we can figure this out. And this is why I can't figure out the state of education today because there's every opportunity to be successful. Retakes, there's, late work accepted, there's, all this and you do have to consider to an extent when students have things going on either with themselves or, at home, but it's like, where's the cutoff? Do we say this is beyond your ability or, whatever? I don't know. It's frustrating as an educator because you're like,
Right.
what is the point?
And when it translates into just a blanket policy where the school says, oh, everybody can turn in their work late for this much off.
Right.
And then, okay, fine. But what's the lesson there?
Because
I
again, that does not translate into reality. These classes that I'm working in, I've discussed with teachers, we often feel like there should be some kind of like prerequisite for some of these classes. Like, you have to have an attendance requirement. If you've missed X amount of days in the previous year, you can't take this class because your record shows that you probably won't show up for class or you didn't make whatever grade in this class. Well, then you don't need to take this class because, again, you're setting that kid up to pick up the tab because they're going to end up with that. Like you said, you've got an F on your record and now your GPA is blown. It's like, well, if you had not been put in this position in the first place, then that wouldn't have happened. So that's unfair to the student. They're picking up the tab because some adult somewhere's like, oh, no, it'll be fine. They can do it. They can do it. Well, maybe they can, but will they?
That's the important question right there. Yeah. Will they? Do they want to? Should they?
Yeah.
If it's something that they're maybe not interested in doing, should they?
Yeah.
Hey, if it's a healthcare class or if it's aviation or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Every kid deserves a chance. But at some point, parents and I guess teachers, I don't know, probably more parents though, because they have the deciding vote, so to speak, know your child. Because like I said, I have two children myself. They are completely different. They are night and day, yin and yang. So I did not raise them the same because that would be ridiculous.
Can you give me an example of that?
So my older son he's in the Navy and he's very regimented. And we always knew that he would do very well in the military because he's the person who he executes. You give him a direction. He doesn't ask why you did that. He does what you ask him. We're like, military's for you. That's a good one. And my younger one is a lot more free spirited and he's forging his own path. Both of my children have graduated high school and they're in the real world. And it's like, the younger one, he may decide to go in the military, but he's one who's going to question things. And my older one, he doesn't. He just executes. So it's like, would the younger one do well in a military setting? I really don't think so. But you're an adult, make your own choices.
And there you go. It's up to him.
Yeah. That's something else too. I think that the education in general, there's certain things and this may be clouded by my own judgment of how I grew up. And like I said, the environment that I grew up, it was very much like you graduate high school and you go to college, end of. That's what you do. But that was the community that I grew up in. It's like, I feel like a lot of schools push like the AP classes and that sort of thing. I'm a big proponent for dual enrollment because I feel like that's a better return on investment. Because like with AP classes, you have to get that certain score or you don't get credit for the class. You have to pay for the test and all this kind of stuff. And it's like dual enrollment. C's get degrees. You pass that class, you're going to get, you know,
And you're saving some money.
and you're saving some money. And it's like, higher education is very important for people that have specific goals in mind. A teacher, a doctor, this sort of thing. My sister, for instance, she has a degree in English literature. She's a paralegal.
Interesting.
And how she got into the field, she interviewed for a job, and the lawyer that she was working for, his mother had a degree in English, so he had a soft spot for English majors. She got into that. I think she's been doing that for 30 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's how she got into the career. I think that's true for a lot of us. We just kind of fall into things, but that's not what she went to school for. But she's
Mm.
excellent at it because she's a type A person and she is like that Hollywood secretary that knows your thoughts before you think them and has solved all the problems before they even come up. So, I mean, it's the perfect job for her.
That is
But
not me.
no, no, not at all. But I think, again, that goes back to parents know your children. You need to know yourself, who you are. Like that comes with age too. And that's why I think I love those aptitude tests because it does help you kind of guide kids and like, this is the general area that you need to go into, not specific. No, do I want to be a farmer? No. Do I have chickens and goats and dogs and cats? Yes, I do. So
You do?
I do, but I don't have like a dairy farm. I'm not getting up at 4:30.
But you have your chickens and you have your eggs. You have kitty cats and goats. You have goats.
Yes. And isn't that
Oh.
ironic that all those aptitude tests were like, "You should be a farmer." And I was like, "You're crazy." And here I am with my little mini farm. So
That's funny. I don't think we even give those in school outside of the ASVAB.
so they don't do those anymore?
I don't think they do.
Oh,
I
that's
know
a
that
shame.
yeah, we definitely don't at my school. My school district really pushes AP and all of that you were just talking about. And to my knowledge, we don't give aptitude tests.
Well, and I don't see the importance of the AP classes necessarily. Like I said, unless you're like, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be, whatever. And those classes are very important and to get into
Sure.
whatever school that you need to. But, I have family members that went to whatever school for like their core, and then they transferred into these larger schools. Have a lower requirement for your GPA as a transfer in, and less
True.
money because you're not spending the money for your core classes. I have a nephew that he went to Australia to get his master's and did that for a couple of years. He has his bachelor's from University of West Georgia, and he did dual enrollments and, but yeah, he ended up going living in Australia for 2 years to get his master's in
Oh, that's
geology.
amazing.
Rocks. Yeah.
Rocks? Rocks? What's he gonna do with rocks?
Well, I mean, hey, there's always the government jobs. He I don't know what company he's working for, but he's working for some company. I mean, he was doing all kinds of like big experiments in Australia. When he came back to the States, he had some rocks that got stuck in customs because they're like moon rocks or something that he was trying to get back to
Mhm.
the States. Had Australian dirt on it, so they didn't want it to come
Oh,
back.
yeah, I can't do that.
It was crazy. But this kid went to University of West Georgia and he did dual enrollment and he's done big things. And it's hard for me to understand this pushing of like, these AP classes and you got to do this. It's a lot of stress on kids.
It is, and, you think about how much time students who are taking multiple classes like that are spending studying, and do you pause and ask them the question, "Well, what is it that you want to do? What are you
Yeah.
interested in?"
And I think I mentioned that when you were asking me earlier about things is I really feel like parents, some of this needs to be like an exit interview at the end of high school. It's like, where do you see, or even in the beginning of high school, where do you see your kid in 5 to 10 years realistically? Because I think about my graduating high school class of 450 kids. We have like a judge. We have one who was like an international Christian singer, all and that. The rest of us are regular people.
Yeah.
We're not setting the world on fire, but, we're doing things that we love and that are important and matter to us, and we're happy.
Yeah,
And
you're living your lives.
yeah.
But
So
and you also have to think, if we had these aptitude tests and could help kids decide earlier maybe what things they're truly interested in, and then could craft a path for that, like they do in Germany. If
Mhm.
we could do something like that, imagine how much time we could save for these kids who
Absolutely.
are, going and getting their medical degrees and then deciding they want to act or,
And
going.
frustration is part of the student, the teacher,
Mhm.
parents, on everybody. But again, like I said, I took 2 aptitude tests and an ASVAB that were like, "You should be a farmer." I'm like, "You're crazy." Yeah. Well, here we
Well,
are.
that's
And I mean, my
we need to
ASVAB,
be creative. with how we need to be creative with how we steer kids to interpret this
Absolutely.
test.
Well, and my counselor in high school, because my high school is very college driven, it was like, we don't need to worry about that." I don't even know if he knew anything about, like, landscape design or horticulture or, anything. But now that I'm an adult, I realize that, like, University of Georgia has a fabulous agricultural program, and you can be learning about how to make better seeds or disease-resistant plants, like, all these things that to be learning about that encompass that kinda, like, farmer thing. But it's like, even when I took the ASVAB, what I tested out highest in was, like, mechanical and electrical, which, having family that's in farming, so much of that is in farming because you gotta fix your own problems.
Right.
You can't call people, you can't afford to call people, so you just gotta kinda figure it out. But it's like all those things together, now it's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that would've worked." But here we are.
We're so uncreative with
Yeah.
future paths for our kids. We're so uncreative. I don't know, graduate high school, go to college, major in, I don't know, English or math or engineering, go to grad school. What are you going to do with that? Right.
Yeah.
Well, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, but there's so much more than that, right?
Yeah, that's so limited because, like, I have kids in
Yeah.
aviation that, I mean, honestly, they're probably not gonna be pilots, but, they could be creating video games that are aviation based, 'cause you have, like, simulators. My father, he was in the aviation industry, and he gets on his simulator and flies here and he's on the computer for 2 hours because that's how long that flight takes to get to St. Louis or Chicago or something, so he's just, like, puttering around. So these kids that are doing these classes, it's like it's good because I think, like I said, every kid deserves a chance, and it's like, yes, take the classes, see what you think. But just because you're not going into that field or you think you might wanna go into that field, well, let's explore that further, okay? You probably don't have the aptitude to do whatever that job is, but maybe you could do something over here kind of related to that. And I think you're right. I think that's exactly what it is. We just need to get creative at how we guide these kids.
And to tell someone that they don't have aptitude for a specific thing is not saying that they're not smart or they're not valuable. There's a lot that I don't have aptitude for. I mean, nobody can have aptitude for everything. Well, we try to fit everybody into the same box in our
Yeah.
high schools.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah.
why I like a charter school because I do feel like it definitely gives so many more opportunities to kind of explore things. And like I said, high school and college, that's what that's for. That's to kind of figure it out of what are you good at? What do you enjoy? What's out there? Because that was something else one of my majors in college was nursing, and I wanted to be a labor and delivery nurse. And my first semester, it's funny because ended up a flight attendant. That's one of the things you learn how to do is deliver a baby in flight. But
Feels I guess you would have to, yeah.
you do all the things as a flight attendant. You
Oh
put
my
fires
goodness.
out, you evacuate planes, you do CPR, birth babies.
So, flight
Yep.
attendant, you're in the medical field, you're firefighting, you're relations. Goodness gracious. I don't, that's too much for me. I don't think I can do that.
Yeah. So when I was a nursing major, it was my first semester at college, and I ended up on academic probation because first semester you take way too many difficult classes as you're transitioning. And so the dean of the School of Nursing, I had to go meet with the dean, and I told her, I said, "Well, next semester I'm going to have a 4.0." And she said, "Well, my dear, the proof is in the pudding." And I will never forget that. I did have a 4.0 the next semester, but I was
See, look at you.
maybe I should rethink this. Maybe this woman knows what she's talking about because I was like, do I really have like the chutzpah and the drive to like see this through? And I was like, no. And then I got older. And when I was a flight attendant, I flew with somebody who's from out west. And she told me about something I had never heard of, which was a midwife and a doula. And I was like, what is this? So, because, we live in the Southeast, so it takes time for these kind of progressive ideas that are kind of West Coast to find its way
Right.
to the Southeast. So I'd never heard of a
For sure.
midwife or doula. But then at that point, when I was already in my career, as a flight attendant, I was like, man, that would have been the thing instead of doing like the whole nursing school. Because to be a labor and delivery nurse, you have to do like geriatrics, burns, all of the nursing things before you get specialized into whatever you want to do, if it's cardiac or whatever. So I was like, "Oh, man, that would have been something that I would have definitely like a midwife or a doula specialized." But again, that goes back to getting creative about what kids are interested in. I mean, like, "Oh, have you ever heard of?" But then we have to know those things before we can suggest them to a kid.
We do. And I'm sitting here while you're talking about the midwife doula thing. I'm trying to think of other creative jobs like that. And my mind is blank.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm guilty. I
Yeah.
don't know. You could be a teacher or go to go to
Well,
college.
it's just a big world, and there's so many things out there that, you've never heard of until you get out in the world and see some things and talk to people, you're not gonna know what it is. And that's one of the things in the healthcare classes, I talk to kids a lot about things like that. "Well, have you ever heard of this? Have you ever thought of that?" "Oh, well, you're really friendly and, you like the medical field, so, have you ever thought of doing something like a doula or midwife or something like that, where you don't necessarily have to have the qualifications of a registered nurse, but it is something." So, because everything ain't for everybody.
No, it's not. And that's okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the charter school where you work? Because I think that it is kind of interesting in that it does offer students alternate paths, whereas the public schools don't really do that. But I know that your charter school doesn't work against the public schools in the county, it works with them. So
Mhm.
students have their base high school and they are enrolled there, but then they'll come to your school during the day for specific classes. Can you tell me a little bit about that model?
Well, I mean, and it's interesting because they can do that where they go to their base school part of the day and they come to our school for part of the day. But both of my kids, by the end of their careers, they were at my school all day. They were taking all their classes there because they did the dual enrollment and they got college credit along with high school credit. And I love that model. I love that that opportunity is available because, and now they have something that is, oh, I can't remember the name of accelerated career, which meaning if you say you want to do like cosmetology or you want to do automotive or something like that, they will put you on a path where your classes are very specific to that job. So you like my youngest child, he did accelerated career for automotive. He was given the opportunity to graduate at 17 as a junior because he had those classes completed, and a lot of it's like slotted in. Because I mean, there's no point in taking calculus or something like that if you're wanting to do something that has nothing to do with calculus.
Right.
So I'm not sure how they do it, how they like slot the classes in or the credits or whatever. But we're actually graduating a lot of kids early because they're taking these accelerated career paths. And I mean, they get a high school diploma, same as Susie, who went and took her AP classes. Now, of course, she's going to get that high honors diploma, but they're all going to get the same diploma and they're going to walk.
Susie might be valedictorian, but she
Exactly.
probably won't graduate as a junior ready to go and make money as a mechanic or a welder either.
Exactly, exactly. My school is kind of closer to that European model of doing things. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for kids who maybe aren't traditional students. And to say they're not traditional students, that also means maybe they're more focused than I ever was. And are like, this is what I want to do. I've always wanted to do this, and it's what I'm going to do. Be on that path and be successful. And like you said, 17 years old, start making that money and no student debt because you're dual enrolled and getting college credit while you're going to high school and stuff.
That's a great opportunity.
It really is.
I'm curious, what's your favorite moment in the classroom so far?
Gosh, my favorite moment. I mean, for me, it's just it's kind of funny because my favorite moment is when it's downtime and I just get to talk to the kids and really kind of hear their thoughts on things. And when they will talk to me, because I'm in so many different fields I mean, I do film and audio, video, and flying and medical and all this kind of stuff. And because I have lived a little bit before I got into education, I generally have like some kind of story that'll like reel them in. Like when I was a flight attendant and I got to meet famous movie stars or politicians or whatever and could talk to them about, things like that and chartering football teams or baseball teams and meeting all this stuff. And it like gets them to open up and I get to hear what they want to do or what they have done so far. It's just, that's the part that I really love is when they just kind of relax a little bit and you can just chat and not necessarily talk about school, but you can always bring it back around to, well, you could maybe think about doing this and maybe you should think about doing that if that's what you're interested in. And it's just, my school is so unique because of the opportunities that it gives kids that you don't get at the base schools. But having said that, I really wish in education that we could kind of like dial it back a little bit because I feel like we have lost so much of the so important basics of like how to write legibly, like punishing, and like basic things like consumer math, like how to, keep up with your checking account, how to apply for a loan, how to do your taxes. Years ago, we had a teacher at my school that was his final. He would go around with a hat and you had to pull out a job with a salary out of the hat. And that's what you were going to do with your life. And then you had to build a budget for your life. And that was your final exam for his class. He taught economics.
Okay, I was going to ask. That sounds like economics. That sounds like a great project.
And it was fabulous. And it's like, these are the skills that kind of carry over into life. And while those other things are important, if you want to be a doctor or a plumber or, whatever you want to be, yes, we need to get you in that direction. But there's certain things that, frankly, parents aren't necessarily good at. So it's like you can't teach people things that you don't know about. So it's like, I feel like we unleash these kids out of like, general, high school with no life coping skills. And a lot of that comes from that background of self-contained special ed when you're teaching children life skills. Like this is how you run a washer and a dryer, and this is how you use the stove safely, and this is how you do things. It's like I feel like we just unleashed these children. I mean, my youngest child, he had a moment after he graduated where he was kind of freaked out because he did do that accelerated career. He wasn't going on to college. He was like, now what? And I kind of chuckled and I said, sweetheart, you did at 18 what a lot of people do at 22, 23, 24 when they graduate college. And they're like, now what?
Exactly. Because everybody goes through that. He just went through a senior.
It's such a shock. But it's like, you don't. And when we went through COVID, I had mom's life skills class because we were all like locked in at home. So, I was teaching my kids how to sew a button on a shirt and how to balance a checkbook and how to make cookies and like all these basic things. So like, I can't teach you trigonometry, but I can teach you how to make a meal and I can teach you how to be somewhat self-sufficient so you can survive in life.
Great idea. We really should have life skills classes for our regular education students because we just don't. And they don't know how to sew buttons or balance checkbooks or
STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. These little life skills lessons, you can incorporate those into the science, technology, sure, all those kind of things. And you can, I don't know, I mean, you make it fun. And I remember when I was in middle school, we did a field trip to Six Flags. And it was a science field trip. And we talked about like just the science of roller coasters and all this stuff. And we had worksheets that we had to fill out on the roller coasters at Six Flags. And that was a lesson that stuck because I was like, oh my gosh, we're at Six Flags. This is so fun. Does it take more effort? Absolutely. It absolutely does. But if you can teach something to a kid that they remember forever, it's like that's something. I cannot tell you how to prove a circle in geometry anymore. I know I learned it, but I can't tell you how to do it anymore because it doesn't translate into my life. There's certain things that I just feel like, and I feel like my school does a good job of that. But in general, I feel like education in America, it's just like we're so concerned with hitting these points. It's like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do that. We have the state tests coming up, and we got to learn all this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like not a love of learning.
Yeah. It's like almost like we want to put these little acorns of knowledge into the student's head, and at the end of the day, what do they really mean?
Yeah. And I remember my 10th grade literature teacher had us read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. That was the book that got me into classic literature because I had never read any classic literature before then, but that developed this love of classic literature. And it's like, I just feel like we would dial it back to kind of the basics so we can really, because to me, the most important thing is if you can get a kid to love learning, not necessarily the subject, but just the act of learning, like wanting to know and all this kind of stuff. And it's so hard these days because technology, you just ask ChatGPT. You don't have to learn anything. You just ask your phone. I feel like we are in this hair on fire race to this imaginary finish line of like state tests and milestones and all this kind of stuff. And it's like the love of learning gets lost in it because kids are freaked out because they're like, you got to take this test. You got to do well. And nobody speaks. And if you speak, the test is ruined. And like, what are we doing?
Right. If you don't take this test, it's the end of the world. But
Oh, yeah.
is it? Because what I think might really be the end of the world is not them not taking the standardized test, but them never developing that love of learning. That seems tragic to me.
Exactly. Because what happens if you're not learning? You're just taking everything that you see on the internet or the news at face value. A little
Very, very scary, especially now. You could ask Chat GPT and it starts hallucinating a bunch of things, and you're like, oh, yeah, the sky is green and the grass is purple and we live on the planet. You're nerd. Yeah. Chat GPT said.
Yeah, exactly.
So, one last thing. What's something about your job that people outside of education just wouldn't understand?
The workload. I mean, the amount of kids that you have to see in any given day in different subjects. One of my coworkers, we at the beginning of the year, you get your schedule together. We were talking about class load and everything, and she was like, "Oh, girl, that's nothing." One year, I had 8 classes to get to every day, but that math ain't mathin'.
No.
So I'm like, how you do that?
I don't know.
I mean, there's 5 days in a week, and you've got kids that get certain amount of time in every class period or block or whatever. I'm like, how do you do that? You're only one person. I'm just praying I never have to figure that algebra equation out for myself. So I love spending time with these kids and just get a class period where you can like spend an extra 30 minutes in there. I mean, not only is it good for you because you're learning the material that much better to be able to help them, but just to learn the kids, their personalities, it's like what's going on in their world. And that's the great thing about being a parapro because you might have a class where you've got 1 or 2 kids in that class. You get to know all those kids. And it's so great because working in higher grades, high school, you might get to see those kids for 4 years to get to know them, their family, what's going on. It's a gift. And I love it so much. And people talk about retiring. I'm like, I'll never retire as long as it's on the way it is. I love my job. And I love these.
That's really nice.
I would not, I don't do the job for the money.
No, you don't do the job for the money. None of us do, but I swear parapros are so underpaid. Parapros, school nurses, don't get me started.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. For real.
Well, it is such
I know.
because when you're a parapro and you're dealing with IEPs and kids that struggle a little bit, it's like you have to find that thing. You have to find their currency. What's it going to take to get them to do the work? And I mean, that takes time. And then you're kind of behind the 8 ball because you've had to spend like the first month figuring this kid out. What makes him tick? How am I going to be able to help him? And then you can go from there. But it's tough. It's tough.
Thank you for doing it. We need parapros like you. I really appreciate everything that you do. Tracy, I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Same. I'm so glad to finally get to meet you. It's been a pleasure.
I know, right? It's been a great pleasure. Right. Well, Tracy, thank you again for coming. And I've really enjoyed our conversation. And thank you for all you do.
Oh, gosh, likewise. I can't believe an hour has already passed by. It's been a joy. I've enjoyed it very much. I was so nervous, but now, wow, it just flew by.
Yeah, no, it's just a conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Tracy's teacher law that if your child can't or won't do the work, they will fail. And that's okay because everyone isn't able to do everything. Really cuts to the heart of something we talked about throughout our conversation. Too many adults working in education, and especially those making education policy, are woefully uncreative about our students' future prospects. We keep trying to fit square pegs into round holes instead of thinking in terms of what's actually best for each student. What's going to give them the most fulfilling life? What's going to be best for their future? Not state test scores, not standardized test results, not CCRPI ratings, or any of that stuff. What's going to be best for this child's future? And I love that's exactly the focus of Tracy's Law. Not what their parents want for them, not what their teachers want for them, but what will actually fulfill the student. If Tracy's perspective resonated with you and you'd like to share your own teacher law in a future episode, I would love to hear from you. Head on over to leahcleary.com/guest form to fill out the form for If Teachers Ruled the World segment of the show. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And make sure you follow the show on your favorite platform and leave a review if you liked this episode, so other teachers can hear about it too. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. That's it for this week on If Teachers Ruled the World. Be sure to subscribe, share with a teacher friend, and join the conversation at leahcleary.com. Until next time, keep ruling your classroom and rewriting the rules.